about my background, it naturally lent. So my interests are in human beings, people,
Mm.
the experiences they're having. My research background in terms of qualitative and quantitative research um, put me in a good place. I'm very good at conversation and making people feel hopefully relaxed and in a place where they feel they can trust and hold that space quite well, I think. So it was a natural first start. So I worked for Nile as a contractor for helping them with the user research for a few years, and they really helped build up my experience. I really have a lot of respect for the work that Nile do in Edinburgh. And I got the opportunity to work in a lot of different banks, for example, NatWest, Tesco Bank, um, quite a few financial institutions where they were specialising, and that gave me the confidence and experience to then move into government. And my first government gig was actually with HMRC. And I got sometimes you look back and go, crikey, the opportunities I was fortunate to have. So my first actual proper government gig was working on making tax digital, which if I, you've done your tax return recently, you'll probably know more about than I nowadays. So this was moving to an API first approach for collecting your taxes. No one likes submitting the end of year tax return. So we were looking at how we could help people provide data throughout the year through their software. So they didn't have the big tax return at the end. Also meant that HMRC didn't have to wait a whole year. You think about HMRC's finances, nothing happens. Then all of a sudden, come January, everybody has to throw in all this money over to the government in one month. So they wanted to try and change the way in which we were spending, giving our tax money back to the government. So it was really, really interesting project. And there you're thinking, well, who's the user? If it's an API first strategy, who, who who is the user here? Is it the end user who is filling their tax return, or is it actually the software vendors who are making the tax software because they are the ones who are having to use the APIs? So we would really try to look at it as a full 360 and try and look at, okay, how do we help support the end user by supporting the vendor, and what do we mean? What does that mean? So that was a really interesting journey right from the beginning. So from there, I'm fortunate to have had a really fun career working with Department for Health. I was working with GDS. We were helping governments around the world who got themselves into um, difficult situations in terms of fraud. Often the previous prime minister might have been ejected and they brought in a new government, and we were there to help them show them how to build digital services that were transparent and would support transparent procurement, so that it was harder to defraud the government. So that was a great experience. We were in Indonesia one day, then you might be in South Africa the next day, then over to Mexico. It was one of my favorite experiences. And also on these journeys, you meet all these fantastic people, and you're always learning from everybody that you encounter. So, I went, my first gig with government was as a user researcher, and then I started to see what the service designers were doing. I thought, oh, I like that. That's definitely more me. Just moving into service, and that got opportunities to move into that space. And then as I'm doing services, I'm thinking, well, actually, I seem to be doing a lot of product work. Seems to be more product because I'm doing all the stakeholder management and really holding the vision for everybody else. And then slowly moved into the leadership roles. I think the big break in terms of leadership was local government. So I was working in the Ministry of Housing with Steve O'Connor. He was deputy director there, and he was moving over to Kingston Council and said, John, would you come and help me transform the organisation? They're a bit they're still siloed. They haven't adopted agile ways of working. They don't really get DDAT. Would you come and help me transform the organisation? And I said, love to. So I went in as a service designer. It's really interesting because I never set out to change the culture particularly. What my job really was to look at the operational side of it. Um, and all my design thinking just kicked in. I applied design thinking process to transformation of people, and it works. It does. If you look at um, what they tell you to do in terms of culture change, you follow the same process of design thinking, you end up in the same place. You're still looking at trying to get leadership buy-in. You still have to get the engagement from the people. You still have to, do the training and the development and build up those spaces. One of the things I found fascinating was, this career has given me that skill set of design thinking, which I can apply to any domain. And I hadn't really appreciated that. This was not a digital transformation. This was a transformation of a digital team, which is a different thing. So it's my first time of actually applying design thinking to something that wasn't a digital piece of software. And that was A, fascinating, B, really, really successful in what we achieved there. I still have huge amounts of great friends from that particular place, and some of the people who I was able to support and mentor are off doing amazing things in central government at the moment. So yeah, I think from that was my first taste of leadership, and from there I've just gone on and really enjoyed that path and trying to bring as much value to an organization by sharing that expertise and really trying to foster that sense of, we talk about servant leadership, and I think that's kind of the key thing. It's like trying to give the disciplines, the domains, that the respect, so that they can bring their expertise. Whereas if you look at the old school way of doing it, project management versus product management. Project management, when I've seen it, is very much like the project leader comes in, he's the expert, tells you all what to do, and everyone just sits back and waits until they've been told, and then, okay, I can get on with it. Whereas, when you actually have proper product management and delivery management working together, what you end up with is a team that's empowered, and they lean forward, and they're coming up with, based on their domain of expertise, ways of, they're self-augmenting teams. I mean, it's that's when you get the true power of a multidisciplinary team. It doesn't work if you've got a multidisciplinary team, just kind of fails if you've got one person dictating everything. That is your problem. So yes, I think that learning about some of the leadership aspects, which you're probably not thinking about when you're a service designer or a user research. You're just getting on, and your focus is delivering those artifacts. I think as you work your way up the system, you start to see the bigger picture. Understand a bit more about leadership, but you also understand that, as a user researcher, you're not there to just make persona. The whole point of making a persona is to help inform the team about, what the user is. And I think sometimes in our little disciplines, we get too carried away with making the artifacts, and we lose the bigger picture, which is, we're here to add value, and the way we're adding value to the team is because we've done all this research over here, and we've got to try and help you understand it so you guys can do your work better. And I think that sometimes gets missed, and that's one of the big things I try to help and support my teams with, is helping see the bigger picture, understanding what we're all trying to achieve together, and trying to work out how we're going to get there together.
So
that seems a bit of a ramble, doesn't it?
No, not at all. I mean, that one piece of advice, like worry about the outcome, or worry less about the deliverable. I think that's sage advice, because we're all in a rush, aren't we? We've got to, we've got things to deliver by certain dates, and those dates kind of overtake everything, don't they? They don't take into consideration what the outcome will be, how we're going to change the way people are affected by a service, or the types of benefits that they can accrue. They're not at the forefront. It's about getting to a date, isn't it? So much in digital delivery.
It is. And that is usually because you've got external factors, don't you? So you've got, we've got a burning platform, the contract's coming to an end, they're all the things, or someone's promised something to a minister, and I go, so my job is always to try and push back and say, okay, look, we obviously work to that best we can, but I also need to understand what are my plans B, C, and D if there are issues, because there's lots of unknown unknowns when we start a project, and you can get in there and find a can of worms, and you need to know that what your alternatives are if those dates are just not permissible. I mean, it's a triangle. We know this. You got quality, you got time. What's the third one? Quality, time,
Budget.
Budget, that's the one. Yes, sorry, old man head brain for a moment. Yes, so you could. That's all you've got to work with at the end of the day. So we can bring in more people in. That often that doesn't help actually. The budget only gets bigger really a lot of the time for me is if the time's going to take longer. I find adding more people to the problem, it just makes it a bigger piece of spaghetti to try and manage and doesn't necessarily get you over quicker. It just becomes more of a management problem. I prefer small squads of people getting in there and doing bits of work, and then effectively you get as looking after the whole program. It's a lot easier to coordinate those. I don't think adding more people to a squad actually helps. It's about, okay, can we pick that problem apart and add a different squad to a different area of the problem? Is there something, a different piece of tech? Is a different way of thinking about that? Or okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to, why did we choose that date to tell the minister that it seems an arbitrary date? Is there any reason for that? Can we push back on that? So it's understanding those where we can push back, and what are the levers we can pull to make sure we deliver. I'm fortunate. I think I've worked on one project that was delayed, not because of anything that my teams were doing, but they also wanted to do a bit of a waterfall delivery, which was, it's like, okay, right, we're just going to switch the service on now, and they're going, oh, that's my least favorite idea of everything you've got here. And I'm not going to talk about the organization. There's, some of the organizations you work for, you can try and bring in an agile way of working. You can try and explain, but at the end of the day, you can't always get your client to drink the Kool-Aid. And this particular client said, no, this is how we work. We are going to switch it all on. We can't. We need to. We need to be saving money from this date. And as much as I could try and convince them, that was not something that was going to budge. In the end, I had to budge because the rest of the team weren't ready. And I said, right, fantastic. Here's our opportunity now. Can we now do this in an agile way? Can we release this bit, and learn from it, as opposed to just, the way they could have approached it was actually going live with different demographics of audience. So therefore, you could very quickly identify if there's going to be a problem with a particular use group. But anyway. These are part of the scars, and I believe that's what this is about. Scars.
Yeah, well, it absolutely is.
We might know the best way of doing it, but
yeah.
I honestly think I'm pretty good at stakeholder management and trying to take people with me, but can't always do it. It's not always possible. So, and I think that's having that reality check and being aware of, it's not always on your shoulders to. There are certain things that are just immovable, and you're just not in your power to give.
So, just bringing this to a conclusion, John. I mean, we've covered so many different areas. And
Sorry
I
about
really
that.
get this. No, it's been absolutely brilliant, and I get the feeling that we could talk for a long time, and we haven't even touched like game design and gamification in any detail yet. We've got all those beautiful board games in the background.
Yeah.
There. But I think let's say that, because I think we'll get another podcast out just out that, which I would love to do. But I think, just as a final thought, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are for people coming into the industry. And let's just make it a bit more specific. We've talked a lot about user research, user experience. We talked about service design. So it's that kind of consultancy piece, helping organizations, and they could be public sector, but we've talked about the private sector a little bit as well, helping them to think about user needs and think about how we prioritize outcomes for users. What, for someone starting out at the beginning of their career, and with all the wealth of experience that you've got fighting all those battles and accruing all those scars, what advice would you give to someone coming into the industry, and how would they help to build that resilience that you clearly have in just remaining focused on helping users?
I think I've got quite a few big, quite controversial ideas about this. I'm sorry. So let's talk about user research first. I think there's a lot of people that may have come into user research from different professions, and what they don't have, unfortunately, is some of the understanding of research. They can be very good at talking to people. I've met user researchers, for example, who come from journalism, and they're very good at interviewing people, and that is great. But doesn't necessarily mean they understand qualitative and quantitative data. They don't understand when you'd apply different methodologies. They don't necessarily understand there are multiple different methodologies. They wouldn't dream of doing a cultural probe, for example. The interesting ways of actually understanding the user. Because if you're just trying to jump into this profession, I think there's a lot of people doing that over the last 10 years. Lots of money in UX at the moment. I can talk to people. And I think we've actually ended up in a bad situation because of this, because I think what a lot of clients see is like, you're just going out to talk to people and ask them what they like. And you go, no, we shouldn't be doing that. But I do think there has been potentially, some people who maybe have been doing more of that and less of the actual proper academic, truly understanding why we're doing it, what we're doing, and maybe leaning more towards I can create a persona, I can go and talk to people, I can do that, but not necessarily having the rich background that gives them the opportunity to just. It's not about these tasks, it's about what you're trying to achieve. And if you're just concentrating on, I do this and this and this, and then I get to that, you're never going to be inventive. You're never going to break those barriers. I mean, I can remember, I doing user research, and I was really frustrated because they were bringing in a new authentication system. And I said, look, this is going to really, really upset people. I don't think you realize you're really negatively impacting your audience. So I actually brought in galvanic skin response, which you wouldn't necessarily think about if you come from a totally different discipline. So had people wearing rings that allowed me to monitor how stressed they were getting while they're doing it. And you could still see spikes when they're getting frustrated over this change that the tech team were forcing on the user experience, and that gave me the evidence to fight back. Numbers sometimes speak very loudly in ways that, and don't get me wrong, if I've got a video of someone losing it, that's also very good at moving the team and moving the stakeholders. I find numbers often do speak quite strong, especially to people in power. They're used to graphs. They like a nice chart. So if you could actually show them some numbers and say, look, this is the difference. We're seeing stress levels jump to X. So I think the problem with the thing I would really suggest, if you want to get into this, I think maybe it's my academic background myself that I really value the training and experience you get. I mean, I did psychology. It's a discipline that helps you understand human experience. It gives you the skills in statistics. It gives you the skills in qualitative research, and helps you understand what it is. And so once you've actually got those, you can actually then break the rules, and that's fine. But if all you're doing is following a set of processes, I think it can reduce people's respect of a particular industry. And I think maybe at some point that might explain why we're in a bit of a mess in terms of UX. That's probably going to get me no love whatsoever, but.
I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing. It's going back to the basics on research methodology and getting those, I guess, core practices in place, and making it very I guess rigorous, but it also seems to me that you've got a number of different techniques that you bring to bear. So it's also about the creative use of your research techniques to get to a given answer. I think that there's a lot of experience that you've gained in knowing when you're going to deploy a certain technique in a certain scenario.
Exactly, but you need to know that those techniques exist, that there's more ways than skinning a cat effectively. Certain domains, certain ways of certain contexts your methodology will lean into different ways. Your approach will differ, and knowing when to change approach, knowing that there are different approaches, I think that's the key. I've worked with a lot of really, really, really talented UX teams, and I cut my teeth in working with amazing people, and I try to work with them whenever I can. But I just have noticed, that maybe some of that academic excellence that's underpinned the profession. Maybe there's a lot of people maybe jumped in a few years ago that maybe didn't have that rigor, and therefore not as able to deliver research at the same sort of level as I do think I probably just dug myself a little hole.
So to dig out of that hole, what would you like to see? Well, now, what are the big, just to wrap it up, what are the big kind of themes and changes that you see coming up in the industry? What are the challenges and opportunities that we can expect in the next 3 to 5?
I mean, this is where I'm really pleased that I had the opportunity to work in AI. Let's face it. Efficiency gains on that we're going to get from the emerging tech, and the emerging tech at the moment everyone's talking about is AI. The question is how we deliver safe AI, as I was talking about before. You've got to think about the risk appetite for the different organizations, so where you're going to deploy it. I think there's lots of efficiency gains can be made in the back end where the risks are lower, and this really is about simple pattern recognition, being able to do things quicker and easier that a human would have taken ages over, and kind of augmenting the service in such a way that humans can deliver sensibly and concentrate on the bigger issues rather than the boring bits. So kind of, and that's always what automation's been about, hasn't it? It's always been about, let's enhance the human experience. Let's take all the drudge away and let humans do the fun stuff. And that's where I would like us to get to. I think the fear we all have is that, the machine says no, and no one's got any understanding of why that is the case. I mean, I think the UK government's doing a great job in terms of AI. There's strict protocols about explaining how your AI is working. The biggest worry government has is that you've got an AI black box that calls another AI black box, and suddenly no one's got any idea of how that answer came out. But there are strict processes in place at the moment, which make me confident that that won't be an issue. But then also you see some really terrifyingly embarrassing mistakes from both private and public sector. We've got Canadian Airlines, promising, flights at prices that don't really exist, and then you've got European governments trying to bring in social service checks using AI, and people who are already disenfranchised then getting extra scrutiny. And I think that's where I worry about the emergent tech. It's like everything. It's with great power comes great responsibility.
So that's a story as old as the hills, isn't it?
It really is.
Let's go back to the wheel, isn't it? Wow, isn't this wheel thing great? We can make a cart or we can make a chariot. It's and I think we'll still be straight. I hope we have the good fortune to be worrying about that for many centuries to come.
That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'm still really excited about AI. I love the fact that I can talk to my computer. I love that. I can remember the first time I used Alexa and going, Oh my God. That,
Yeah.
that was such a big game change. And, bringing in the AI back, I talk to GPT, I use Gemini, the efficiencies it can help me, but I'm in control. It comes and gives, I might, if I'm writing a paper, I'll go, right, okay, these are the things I want to cover. Chat GPT, give me the first draft. Oh no, I don't like that. I think it needs this.
Yeah.
And then, I have something to build on. It just cuts a lot of the wasted time. I think these tools are incredible, but it's a matter of how we use them and knowing when to use them and when not to.
And that, I think, is a wonderful place to I'm not going to say end, John. I'm going to say pause. That's what I'm going to say, because I feel like we could be talking about many different subjects, and we'd love to have you on again at some time in the future.
Well, that's very kind.
If you have
Thank
the time, it'd be really lovely to talk to you again.
Hey, look, I love talking about myself. It's great.
And then maybe we'll get to next time. Maybe we'll get to have a conversation.
Get the games.
Yeah,
Yes.
the games. That's really, really great.
Maybe that's what we do. We sort of we'll have a game to facilitate our conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. So with that, Dr. Jonathan Sykes, I'd like to thank you very much for being our guest today on Digital Transformation Survivors.
Thank you so much for the invite. It was really nice to chat. And it's not
Absolutely.
often you get the opportunity, is it, to revisit the past like that? That's great, and reflect.
I know, right?
Yeah, fab.
Thank you, John. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.